Greetings, everyone. You've stumbled upon Esoteric Babble. Today, we're going to talk about a few different things brought together. And I think a good jumping off point is to start our discussion with the beginning, the first card, or at least for a lot of schools of thought, the first card in the major arcana of the tarot, and that is the Fool. The Fool has lots of things typically associated with it, or and we might say with that person who's on the path, he or she who is newly, newly begun upon some new endeavor, and a person, particularly probably someone who has started on the path of, either the esoteric path, or they might say a stream enterer in Theravada Buddhism, and any sort of adept in other schools of thought. The couple things to note about the Fool that I think are interesting, and I would invite people to sort of, first of all, you can share your comments of what you think the Fool is really about with me. I'm always interested in hearing from people about that. But also, I would certainly encourage you to study up on the Fool. There's so many great works. I've read Paul Foster Case's book on the tarot. I've also read there's an anonymous book on the what is it called? It has to do with meditations on the tarot. It's sort of a Christian hermetic account of all of that, written by an anonymous priest. And that book, it's worth reading. I don't completely recommend it, but this is not what this podcast is all about. But I would invite you to, there's so many people who are great at, sort of discussing tarot on YouTube, or just, online sources, and countless books. Also, Uspensky's work is good. He has a real short volume on the major arcana. So anyway, my take on the Fool is that in addition to being this first, this instigating principle, I think that we want to view the Fool not necessarily as someone who is foolish, but as someone who is seen to be foolish by those who are not on the path. And that's a key point. That was brought up in another episode where we were talking just briefly about the Hanged Man, and we will come back to that. But how the Hanged Man is upside down, and the values of people on the path seem to be sometimes diametrically opposed to the values of those not on the path. And in sort of maybe a general way, those who are very materialistic and have no eye, or sort of maybe are tone deaf, if I may put it that way, those who are somewhat tone deaf to the spiritual realm or pursuits. And I think that's a good way to understand the Fool, is that, again, from an outside point of view, people who are on this path and who start to give up things, they are not interested in making vast sums of money. They're not interested in attaining, quote, positions of power, or moving up a corporate ladder, or any other sort of structure. They maybe just get by. They may be interested in giving away what they have, or maybe not all that they have, but they're interested in giving to other people, and empathizing or having compassion for other people, and so on and so forth. And actually even trying to have as a goal less and less acquisitions. So it's sort of like one of these teachings of Jesus that, that we all grow up with, and I think people just, sort of, they hear it and they just sort of file it away somewhere. But we want to store our treasure where it cannot sort of deteriorate. And that is what being on this path is all about. And I think that the Fool is a good symbol. Again, from the worldly point of view, from the point of view of those who are interested in only the material realm, who just seek wealth and all sorts of power or sensual pleasures only, it seems very foolish to sort of go the opposite direction. And I think that's the main thing about the Fool. It isn't that the Fool is necessarily even naive, although we all have to be humble about that. And I just heard someone talking about, and I don't remember which Buddhist, which one of these early arahants it was, who was extremely modest and was like sort of downplaying how far he had gone on the path. Like when you, it just wasn't admitting to like how really advanced he was. And I think that, I believe there was a story of Dogen, the founder of the Soto school of Zen in Japan. He had an awakening. After he was enlightened, he went and found a teacher. So again, that shows us how a lot of people are, they sort of radiate this non-arrogance, this non-ego. And that's probably the main thing that we're trying to rid ourselves of is the ego. And that is, the act of giving. Obviously people who need things and they receive them, that's fantastic. Even, you give a little food to animals, or, you give your money to people and so on and so forth. But doing so is lessening our ego, as long as we're not building up an idea of ourselves as being great people for doing that. I suppose there's always, the ego is very cunning and always wants to assert itself. But by giving things up, we are sort of training ourselves to become less egocentric and we're attempting to get our ego to diminish. So that is, I think, one of the better ways to understand the Fool is not like, oh, it's just a carefree person who doesn't understand anything. It's actually someone who's entered the path, but has not, but is someone who is seen as very foolish from the outside. So just one more thing that we could sort of bring into the discussion here is, if we think about the Eightfold Path of the Buddha, the first item on that list is right view, or sammādiṭṭhi. And I would say that one way we could understand sammādiṭṭhi is to think about the Fool, and to think about, and I'm not saying this is the only right view. I mean, I think right view probably, we want to have the right perspective, and that has, there are going to be many bullet points there. And again, this is, one of these things is that we want to decrease our ego. I think that would be part of sammādiṭṭhi. And certainly, being on the path, knowing, entering into the path is part of sammādiṭṭhi. Some would say that even just a knowledge of the Eightfold Path is, or the Four Noble Truths, is sort of the right view. And that certainly is true. And we are going to talk much more in depth about all of these things. But in terms of just the right view, I think that we can think about the Fool here, this tarot card, and sort of bridge a gap between the Buddha's early teaching, and that comes from the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, and sort of Western esotericism. And there's one more thing that I would like to bring up, which I have mentioned before as well, and that is Joshu's dog. It's the first koan from the Mumonkan. And I think this also gives us, it sort of gives us again, a right view or a right way to frame things. And that is, basically, Joshu is asked, I don't have the Chinese here in front of me, and I don't know Chinese that well. I can pick apart a few characters. And actually, I would encourage everyone to do that, whether you can always look up the Chinese characters, dump them into Google Translate or go to a Chinese online dictionary and sort of look at each Chinese character and see, the meaning. Even if you can't pronounce them, you can sort of see how the meanings come together. But Joshu is asked by a monk. Joshu's sort of a Zen master here. A monk asks him, does even a dog have the Buddha nature? And this is a concept that, all living beings do possess this Buddha nature. And, I think he was looking for clarification there. And Joshu just said, no. Sometimes people say mu. And I think that's more of like, that's how the Japanese read that Chinese character. Really, it just means no. And the point is, and I've mentioned this before and you can sort of search this out on your own, the no isn't an answer to the question. It's an answer to the questioning. And that's a very important point. And it's something that you see over and over in Zen. I was just rereading Huang Po. I haven't had my Huang Po book out in like so long. And it's very nice to come back to that. And where he constantly says, at least this is it John, is it Blofeld? I'm sorry if I'm getting that wrong. His translation is excellent. And the phrase putting it into conceptual thought just keeps coming back and back, time and time again. That, I think, is the main point of Joshu's no. Joshu's no. He's trying to get the person who is the adept, kind of the fool, the person who's newly on the path, to get or to put him in the right frame of mind, or to give him like a framework for sammādiṭṭhi, or the right view. And it's telling him and us, consequently, that these conceptual thoughts and trying to figure things out is actually not the way. It's not. It was not the Buddha's way, and you can see this in the. Let's see, which sutta is it? I'm drawing a blank now. The Mula Pariyayang Sutta, where the Buddha talks about how a person who's not, an ordinary person, someone who's not on the path, sees, we might say solidity or something, or they use the word earth, patavi, but, maybe sees extension or solidity and forms concepts about this, and sees, sort of builds up concepts because of that and from that and in it. And that's not what the Buddha suggests. That's what the ordinary run-of-the-mill person does, who could have a great intellect, but isn't someone who's on the path. And for those of us on the path, we are cautioned against that, and that we don't want, the Buddha and many teachers in all these traditions, which we might even call apophatic, are telling us that our mind is just not up to the task. It's good for doing things in front of us. It's even actually good at doing mathematics, but it's not good at trying to grasp reality as it really is. And for that, we have to quiet the mind. And that is, I think, of the many bullet points that we could put under sammādiṭṭhi, quieting the mind, becoming egoless, not forming conceptual thoughts. Those would be big ones, I think, and very important ones. And it's also, this is a good way to sort of bridge these different traditions, where we have Western esoterics and esotericists. We have Theravada Buddhists and Mahayana Buddhists. I mean, this is something I think that everyone would certainly sort of agree to. So that's what I have for everyone today. Peace to everyone, and may all beings be happy and free from oppression.